Welcome back to the Flaky Foodie Podcast. Today we have Emma Basc. She's with Objective Secured. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because I started looking it up and I was like, wow, this is really cool.
Yes, I can. So I am with Objective Secured. I do have lots of different facets. So Objective Secured it's a tabletop gaming business. We run tabletop gaming events, and which is basically Warhammer 40,000. So which I sort of lovingly describe as grown men playing with toy soldiers.
Nice.
It's great. So often I'm the only woman in the room. Occasionally there's another one or two of us, but it's mostly grown men playing with toy soldiers, and they come along and they spend a day or 2 days or a weekend or with us and play some games. So yeah,
very cool.
I also host a podcast called The Hidden World of Women, which is very, very different to Objective Secure.
A lot of guys and testosterone in the room to
absolutely none
to the history of women. Is it a women's history podcast?
No, it's about just telling women's stories. So It's around things that we don't often talk about and things that, women experience, but it's still taboo, or there's possibly still shame around it, or it's just not given airspace. So trying to give women a space to tell their stories and other people to listen and know they're not alone, and hopefully give them some hope.
Awesome. That sounds like an awesome podcast. I'm definitely going to check that out after this is all said and done. So if you can't tell already, Emma is from Australia. So today we're going to be talking about Australian food. So I'm very excited because I'm very excited to learn.
I love food, and I haven't quite had breakfast yet. And I was thinking I should have eaten before I was talking about food.
So I have one kind of listener question. It's my friend at Foodball Podcast, another food related podcast. And he just said the only question he had was Vegemite. Why?
Oh, look, I'm right there with him. So
okay, really? Okay.
No, it's vile. It's so bad. So Vegemite was actually, I don't know if you know how Vegemite originated. So when they were making beer, it was literally the sludge that was left over from making the beer.
Nice.
And they decided that a great thing to do with that is slather it on bread and eat it. And I just don't know why. And yeah, so there's no words really. And we do have it in our house, and my husband eats it, but very, very rarely, because if he eats it, he's not allowed within 6 feet of me because the smell is revolting. The smell is probably worse than the taste.
Oh my gosh. So what's the difference between Vegemite and Marmite? I've always wondered.
Vegemite's a little bit thinner, but really they're much of a muchness, and they're both vile.
So no on the Vegemite. So
definitely a no. And I think the hard part is a lot of people, when they come over, so Australian people put Vegemite on, and it's like the slither, that tiniest scraping of Vegemite. So, and it's still pungent. But people come over and they're like, oh yeah, I'll try this Vegemite. And they get a giant tablespoon and just eat it as it is, or put that on so it's, an inch thick on their bread. Oh, it's just a no.
So, no on the Vegemite, no on the Marmite. What are some foods that you do enjoy? Some things that some Australian foods that you enjoy?
So I was thinking about this, obviously in the lead up to this. I think most of the foods that Australia is that we would be taking overseas and things like that, they're probably some of our dessert foods. So we have Tim Tams slams, which, so a Tim Tam is a chocolate biscuit, but you have to bite the opposite corners off the Tim Tam so that you can drink your hot tea through it. But it's a race. So you have to
really?
Yeah. So
we have Tim Tams here on like the international aisle, but this is new.
Oh yeah, you got to try it. But so bite the opposite ends off, and then you turn it and use it like a straw. But the risk is you've got to do it long enough that it goes soft, but not too long that it completely disintegrates in your fingers and drops into your tea. So it's a balance. It takes practice. It takes skill.
So I
So
didn't know. I just, I think it's a new cookie or a new thing to try. So I tried a Tim Tam before, but I didn't know there was a specific art to eating it with your tea, which is very cool to learn.
yeah. So, you can just eat it, but that's for the amateurs. So if you
Was
want to
an
step it up
amateur.
a notch, that's what you got to do. Now you can do it with coffee as well, so
Very cool. So
mm.
you told me to ask you about fairy bread.
So yeah, fairy bread is something that's a staple at all children's parties.
Mm,
But the thing is that it's a staple up until probably early teens.
mm,
But then it comes back when people get to about 30, and it's at every party after that.
mm.
So fairy bread it's just white bread, and it has to be white bread. There's rules to this. So it's white bread with margarine and then dunked in hundreds and thousands or sprinkles.
Yes.
So, and then cut in triangles, and then that's your fairy bread, and everybody has it.
Do you have a cake too, or just the fairy bread?
Oh yeah, no,
Okay.
definitely. But it's part of the party food. But it's not a party if you haven't got fairy bread.
Awesome. I did not know that it was at parties. I thought it was like we do it's like a kid's last resort, which is, a sugar sandwich or sugar on on bread. But I'm like, this is a party food. Very cool.
Yeah, definitely. And it's definitely not a last resort. It's sort of the first thing that you can plan is your fairy bread, and
Mm.
then everything gets planned around it. And if you've got a fancy mum, yours might be cut out in star shapes, but
Mm.
you'll get people who are going, oh no, the originals are triangles. So
Very serious about fairy bread. I love it.
most definitely.
So
And I
what
think
are oh, I'm
I was going to say
sorry.
probably the food that we're most known for, that is most common, would be just having a barbecue.
Yeah, we typically talk about shrimp on the Barbie when we're referring to you guys.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask if that was a stereotype or not. So that's cool.
Um, and it probably is a little bit. So we don't call them shrimp, so they're prawns over here.
Mm,
Um, and I think I'm on the west coast of Australia. If you're over on the east coast up the top in Queensland, there's probably you're more likely to see people having prawns, shrimp on the barbecue. But over here, no, it's just meat. And you wouldn't see very often. You wouldn't see seafood on the barbecue.
okay. Are there any other things, any other like typically Australian foods that you can think of off the top of your head?
It's tricky. We're a really multicultural society, so we will take anybody's food and call it our own. Um,
Sounds like America. That's very familiar.
Definitely Australian. We've got, so it's again another dessert. So we have Pavlova, which is, and there's kind of a debate. Did Pavlova start in Australia? Did it start in
Mm,
New Zealand? And Australia and New Zealand we're obviously really close. And because we are really isolated, and particularly where we are over in Western Australia, we're the most isolated capital city of the world. We're happy to claim that. Whether or not that's 100% true, I'm not sure. But because we sort of were like, oh well, we're sort of part of New Zealand's part of Australia, Australia's part of New Zealand, but we're separate countries. So there's a bit of debate about whether pavlova is from Australia or New Zealand, but we do claim it. And so that's meringue. So it's meringue, and then with lots of fresh cream and lots of fresh fruit, and might be drizzled in passion fruit. And so that's a pretty popular dessert as well, which was created for Anna Pavlova, the ballerina.
very cool to know. So
Yeah.
you have so at a party for your sweets, you will have some fairy bread, maybe some pavlova. Somebody brings some, and of course the ubiquitous cake. And you might have a barbecue at the same time with some meat on it. I think we have an Australian party now.
Yeah, pretty close. Most definitely. Yeah. And the stereotype is, of course, that the men are outside cooking the barbecue. The women do everything for the barbecue, so that
Mm.
they make the salads, they bought the meat, they've prepped everything's sorted. Men literally light the barbecue, cook it, and then get all the praise for it.
So the men
Which I'm
just kind
sure
of
is the same
turn
world
up
over.
and flip and flip some things over and grunt a few times, and it's just like, oh, you did such a good job
Well,
at the
occasionally they'll
barbecue.
pour some beer on the barbecue as
Yeah.
well, so the flames go up and everyone goes, "Oh!" But yeah, that's about it.
So you've traveled a bit as well too, to other countries.
Yeah,
Was there anything that was like a culture shock to you as an Australian food wise when you went to another country?
probably the biggest one for me when we went to Japan. Obviously, I was expecting Japanese food, but we went out for breakfast and I ordered an omelette. And here, when we order omelettes, the eggs are cooked.
Mhm.
And over there, when they do omelettes, so they seal the outside of the egg and then they flip it over, but the inside of the egg is actually still all raw.
Oh
And
wow.
cut it open and just raw egg spilt all over my food, like all over my plate and all over the rest of the food. And I was like, oh yeah, I wasn't expecting that. That that was probably the biggest culture shock. And you know, things like having food brought out to you and the eyes are still on the plate looking at you and things like that. I'm not used to that. That was a little bit daunting. It was a little bit, oh, that actually looks like an animal. That's odd.
Yeah, we're used to our meat being processed
Yeah.
here, in bits and pieces, not the whole thing. So
Yeah. And that
yeah.
whole thing with, when you ask children, where does beef come from? The supermarket. And that disconnect between, well, beef actually started out mooing. But when it's looking at you from the plate, you can't make that disconnect. Yeah,
Mhm.
so it's very much in your face that, oh yes, this is an animal. Mm.
Yes. So you've been to Japan. What other countries have you been to?
So I was born in the UK, and lived there. So if the food in the UK and the food in Australia it's the same food but very different, and it's similar to
Mm.
my experience of food in the US. Same food, just very different. Probably, if I was thinking about my favorite food from the UK, I'm from a place called Yorkshire, and we have Yorkshire puddings, which I don't know if do you have over there? I've never
We
had.
do, but it's not like a common thing. You have to go to a restaurant and get it.
So,
Yes.
yeah. So it's basically a pancake mix, but it's cooked in a so we would cook them in a muffin tray, and
Mhm.
then you put them in a really hot oven, and then they rise up, and you get like a sort of like an inverted muffin, and then fill them with gravy, and so that's part of our roast meals. So that's probably one of the things that I would really, and I love that. But when we go back to the UK, because they now make Yorkshire pudding everything, so
Mm.
they'll do a Yorkshire pudding wrap. And
Mm.
instead of using an actual, tortilla wrap, they use a big Yorkshire pudding and fill it with roast
Mm.
pork and applesauce and, gravy and vegetables. And then it's all wrapped up in your Yorkshire pudding. And then you're out in the cold trying to work out how to eat this steaming pile of roast meal that you're holding in your hand. Yeah. So, and then traveled through the US, and Finland. And I think so Australia is probably one of the only countries in the world where we eat our national coat of arms.
Mm.
Um, but in Finland, we took our children over to Finland and we visited Santa in Lapland, and we hopped on a reindeer sleigh ride,
Mm.
and then we went to a restaurant and we ate Rudolph. So again, challenging. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure I'd recommend reindeer. So I'd say that's an acquired taste.
Yes. So this is just a shameless plug from me. We actually have someone who's going to talk about the food in Finland. So stay tuned
Yeah,
for that episode as well.
definitely ask them what they think about reindeer and whether or not it isn't an acquired taste or maybe, yeah.
Yes. So any other kind of food stories or tales from your travels, or just something like when you're traveling, is there anything that you miss while you're home, that you would have while you're home in Australia?
Uh, Look, we found it difficult when we've traveled around America. One of the things that we found difficult is actually, I suppose, you get used to being able to go to a supermarket and being able to just pick up regular, what we would call regular food, what you're used to eating.
Mhm.
And when we went to America, I struggled because I couldn't find supermarkets. And what's the saying, two countries separated by a common language.
Mhm.
And trying to ask people, where's your supermarket? And sort of looking at me blankly, and I wasn't using the right words, and and trying to going, where, like, where are your biscuits? And they're going, I don't know what a biscuit is. I think, okay, I don't mean cookies. It's sort of like a cookie, but you can put cheese and ham on it. They go, oh, you mean a cracker? Okay, and those kinds of things. Or when we were in Vegas and I had some rubbish, and I said, oh, where's your bin? And just kind of looking at me blankly, and or I tried to buy what we would call sun cream, which we put on to stop getting sunburnt.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like this kind of game of charades of going, and I'm standing in the middle of Target miming putting on sun cream to try and get them to go, oh, you mean sunburn lotion? Or sunburn lotion we would put on after we've got burnt. I want this so that I don't get burnt. So I think sometimes, like when we went to Japan or when we've traveled to France, places like that, then actually I do have a funny story about France, but you're expecting it to be a different language.
Mm-hmm.
But when you travel to places where we all speak English, and then thinking, okay, I was expecting to be playing the game of charades when I was over, in a non-English speaking language, but I just wasn't expecting it here. So that's probably been, with traveling, that's one of the things that I always find really interesting, that we do have this common language and yet we don't. So some of the simple things we get tripped up over.
Were the portion sizes a shock to you? I know a lot of people say that the portion sizes in America.
Yeah, definitely. So we went to the Cheesecake Factory and ordered a slice of cake, and they brought, one of these pieces of cake out for all of us. So I was thinking, okay, well, I think my piece could probably do 4 of us. So, which was great because I love cake, and it lasted me for, it was awesome that they do have takeaway containers. So pop it in the little hotel fridge, and that was my breakfast. But
that's a good breakfast.
Great breakfast. And the endless refills of things as well. That's always a surprise. So, if we go out to a restaurant and you order a soft drink, well, then you order and pay for one soft drink, not you order and pay for as much soft drink as you can consume. Which, when you take children and they're like, oh, you can have as much as you want, they really try and see just how much they can manage. They've drunk their body weight plus some, and difficulties. So what we call lemonade, you call Sprite. So we would always go and I'd order my kids a lemonade, and then they'd bring out an American lemonade, and we'd go, oh no, we don't mean that because we're not used to drinking that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the kid's going, do I have to drink it? Try, baby, just try. You might like it by the end of the holiday. Then we'd be a race, like we'd order lemonade and somebody go, no, we mean Sprite,
So if you're planning on traveling to Australia and somebody offers you a lemonade, be prepared to get a Sprite.
And if you want a lemonade, you're going to be out of luck.
So lemonade's completely not a thing over there.
It's really not. So it's the kind of thing that you might make once in a lifetime because you've got an abundance of lemons on your tree, and it would be cool to try this once with your kids. It's not the kind of thing that, I mean, you can't go out and just buy it at a restaurant. You can't go out and buy it at your supermarkets, but you might make it as a one-off or as a special treat. But because we don't drink it very often, it's a special treat that kids make and go, oh, that's gross. Can I add some proper lemonade to it? Yes.
The lack of carbonation throws them off, I guess. It throws everybody off.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably just one of those acquired taste things again. Yeah. We don't grow up tasting it. So it's just not something that we drink.
Are there any other foods that you missed while abroad that you couldn't readily find?
I suppose we probably go away with the intention that we're going away to try and experience as much as we possibly can. So so when we did travel to France, we went to a restaurant and tried frogs' legs and snails. And have you eaten snails? I'm assuming that you haven't.
No.
We've had them a couple of times, and the first time they came out and they'd come out of their shells. So that's awesome. You kind of, you stab them with your fork and all good. Really, they just taste like garlic butter. But then we took the kids and they came out actually in their shells. So you basically got a plate full of boiled cooked snails that look like they've just been plucked from the garden. And they come with sort of a pair of tongs. But I'd never eaten snails from straight from the shell before. I didn't know what you had to do. And so I'm sat there like in this restaurant and I'm literally trying to crush the snail because I thought you had to break it to get the inside out. I'm trying to crush this shell and the waiter comes
like
over.
Like a crab leg. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that. Thank you. That's not what you do. So the waiter comes over and he just gives me like a very stereotypical French look. And he just takes these little tongs from me and then takes this very delicate fork, holds the snail shell in the tongs, and then just delicately picks the snail out of the shell and holds it up on the fork from me as if to go, duh.
Well, at least he showed you. He could have let you struggle.
They watched me struggle for quite some time before coming over and showing me.
And that was probably a story for them for some time.
Yeah. So, and I think the other, like one of the other things for that particular restaurant was they brought over wine, and that was a place where the wine just kept flowing, but it was very potent wine. So I think we're used to quite low alcohol wines, and then they will bring it over and a couple of glasses and thought, oh, thank goodness that we don't have a car here because there's no way, I'm not sure I can walk, let alone. Yeah. So, but I think that, when we do travel, it's about trying to experience as much of that particular culture as possible because, when we eat Japanese food here in Australia, it's an Australian version of Japanese food. And then so you sort of go, oh yeah, I really like Japanese food. And then you go over to Japan, you're like, oh, this isn't Japanese food. Actually, it's the other way around.
So if someone was coming to Australia and you wanted to give them the same authentic experience that you kind of look for in other countries, where would you take them to go? Or would they even go to a restaurant? Maybe they come to your house or go to someone's house.
Yeah, so I think probably the most authentic experience of the Australian culture would be to actually go to somebody's house, because that's where, we do sort of gather. And so coming from the UK, people go to the pub to drink, and very rarely would people drink at home. Here, we still go to the pubs, but people gather in people's homes, and so that's how we come together. That's how we join. So it is, and it's not, the Australian culture isn't all about drinking. I'll just add that. I know I've spoken about alcohol a few times. I promise it's not all about drinking. I think that might be what we're most well known for, though. So, but we do, we hang out in people's back gardens, and we light the barbecue, and we, the wine flows and the beer flows, and the stories flow. So that's probably what the Australian culture is about, and everybody's welcome. So it doesn't take long before. So when people come and they're coming in as visitors, it doesn't take long before they're at home, and there's universal stories that people can tell and people can share. So it probably would be coming over, and we do bring a plate, which a lot of people, when they first come to Australia, they will so we'll go, oh yeah, it's a bring a plate, which would be similar to an American potluck, based on my experience of sitcoms. So
So for me, if somebody told me to bring a plate, I'm like, do they actually mean a pack of like plates?
exactly.
But it's
Yeah,
bring a dish
exactly
to a
it. It's
potluck. Okay,
yeah.
cool.
And that's exactly it. So then there's that awkwardness of, do they mean they want me to bring my own plate to eat off because they don't have enough? Or why am I bringing a plate? So it is, we want you to bring a dish of food and then everybody shares. So, so there's that kind of thing. And so that it's often bring food to share, everybody chips in so that you don't have the host who's having to do all of the work. But if we have international visitors, then we do, like, we wouldn't eat kangaroo, emu, and crocodile on a daily basis. But if we have international visitors coming out, you can guarantee that there's going to be crocodile sausage, there's going to be kangaroo on the barbecue, there's going to be emu. If we go all out, then there'll be witchetty grubs there, and we'll have some bush tucker, which is so Indigenous Australians, obviously they have their what we call bush tucker. So it's the berries that are from Indigenous plants, and so some of the insects like the witchetty grubs. Those are the kinds of things that we don't eat, but we're going to make sure that they're on the table for the international people. And same with the Vegemite. I don't eat it; it's disgusting. But you can guarantee there'll be Vegemite out if we've got international people coming. So, so my tip for anybody who is coming over and is likely to come to a backyard barbecue is, when you see that food, get your host to eat it first and see what they do.
That's a good tip. So that's very interesting. Now I know.
Yeah.
So don't come back and say, hey, they eat emu over there and crocodile. That was just for my benefit.
That's 100% right. Yeah. And actually, we were coming back from, so you spoke about objectives secured. We run what we call Nerd Camp, which is we take a group of about 30 men down 4 hours away from where I live, and we do sort of a camp for the weekend. But we came back, and so it's quite common that we will see kangaroos. And so we do actually have kangaroos that come to our front garden, and my parents have kangaroos in their front and their back garden. So it is a little bit like what people imagine, that you see kangaroos hopping down the street. But as you get closer to the city, that doesn't happen as much. But we were traveling, and as we were coming back home again, for the first time, we saw a whole heap of emus that were so it was the dad emu looks after the baby emus. So there was a dad emu with his 4 little baby emus, and we had to stop as they were crossing the road. But on the other side of the road, somebody didn't stop. But the emu did survive. But those are the kinds of things that people, I guess that for me, I've lived here for 34 years, actually almost to the day. And that is still exciting. And then, but it's that same kind of thing of going, oh yeah, but we eat you. So, So, and when you're with a group of men, they're going, oh, it's okay. We'll take the emu home and we'll have it on the barbecue. No, we won't. No. It's fun to kill.
You just seen it in action. It's all over.
Yeah, that's it. It's different when it comes from a butcher.
So are there any customs other than, make sure you bring not an actual plate, but a dish to a barbecue? Are there any kind of customs that you've seen, like maybe international guests not necessarily know when it comes to kind of eating and dining?
I had some UK relatives over. This isn't a custom, but it's just sort of so I had some UK relatives come over, and we have a lot of mosquitoes here. And particularly in summer.
I'm in Florida, so I understand.
Yeah, yeah. And they're nasty, right?
Yeah.
And so when you have a barbecue, everybody's sitting outside. So, I mean, there's eau de la Aerogard everywhere because everybody comes in, and the first thing you do is spray yourself head to foot in Aerogard. But I
Which
also
is insect repellent. Okay.
Proving a point beautifully. Yeah. So and so UK relatives, they'd been off on a wine river cruise, and they came back to our house for dinner. And so I'd got a whole heap of different foods out. And so we did have the crocodile that had been soaked in milk, and we did have the kangaroo, but we also had some other, we had like dukkha and things like that. And so we got it all out. And then my cousin's husband went to grab some bread and dunk it in the citronella oil that I had burning to try and stop the mosquitoes, because he was like, oh, I just thought it was oil for the bread. I was like, yes, no. Understand how you came up with that, but everywhere, and anybody in Australia knows that you've got the citronella candles burning, you've got the citronella oil, you've got the citronella coils, everything that you can do to try and stop being attacked by mosquitoes. But for him, I was like, I cannot poison you on your second night in this country. And the other thing, I guess, we do have lots of different words. So and I'm not sure what the American word is for it, but in Australia, everyone wears their thongs, which are flip-flops in the UK. So, but it's a very different meaning depending on where you are. So there's things like, have you got some thongs? Well, that's a very personal question. Wasn't meant to be. And a lot of things. So, I mean, in Florida, you would have similar kinds of things that it gets hot here. Mm-hmm. It gets really hot. So, you do have, so while we're barefoot a lot of the time, you do have to make sure that, so we do the Australian run where you're running across the road, but you have to stop on the white lines in the middle of the road because the road is so hot that you then, you just have to give your feet. So you sort of rest on the white lines to let your feet cool down a bit before you can make the dash to the other side of the road to stand in the cool grass. It's those kinds of things that people from other countries are like,
what are they doing? Yeah.
What are they doing? Why don't you just put your shoes on? Well, because I'm just going across the road. I don't need my shoes. I've got a system. Yeah. So, but culturally, I think we are actually really quite, well, I hope we're really quite inclusive. So it's difficult because we do speak really fast, and I do try and remember, and I do try and slow my speech down, but we speak quickly. We have an accent. We all speak in slang. So it's hard enough because we are separated by this common language, but then we change it. So, everything ends in an O. So if you're going to the servo, or you're going to the bottle-o, or you're going to, because so a servo would be a service station or a petrol station. A bottle-o is your bottle shop, or where you go to buy your alcohol off license. But everything has a different word, but we know what those words are. So often, so in the Objective Secured podcast, my husband and I co-host that, and we'll be having a conversation. Then we'll get sort of a message from an American listener and go, okay, so I'm just wondering, what's this word, this word, this word, this word, this word, this word. Right. Yes. Okay. So I suppose, and we are used to it. So, and I think some people, when we do have international visitors here, people lean into that a little bit. And Australians are often larrikins. So they will lean into the fact that people don't have a clue what's being said. But, and you sort of look at it and see them looking around going, what? But for us, that's really funny. So, yeah. So it's those kinds of things that I'm not really sure how you would describe Australian culture other than it is a culture of humor. It's a culture of mateship. It's a culture of bringing people together. But also, the more we like each other, the ruder we are to each other. So if I'm meeting someone for the first time, I'll always be incredibly polite, and I'll be, but if I know someone, if I know them well, if I like them, if I love them, then that's when the sarcasm comes in. And that's when you start saying things like, I will call my children giant turds. But it's a term of affection, so the meaner we are, the more we like someone, because we wouldn't be mean to somebody if we didn't like them, because that's rude. So, and I think often people come in and go, but you're supposed to love that person. Why would you say that? Oh no, because I love them, I can say that. That's a bit odd. And I understand that's a bit odd.
That's interesting to know. So in other words, don't get too offended. If you're
Definitely not. No. And to be honest, and now people are like, oh, she's being polite. Does that mean she doesn't like me? So probably if someone is being polite to you, I'd be more offended by that than if somebody were to call you a name. Yeah.
Very cool to know. Well, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast. Really enjoyed learning and listening to you today about Australia. So if people want to find your podcast, they want to find out more information about Objective Secured, where would they go?
So you can go to objectivesecured.com.au, and the other podcast is The Hidden World of Women. And both of those podcasts are available on literally any of your streaming sites.
Okay, so wherever you find the Flaky Foodie podcast, you can find the hidden stories of women.
Hidden World of Women.
Hidden World of Women. Sorry, that mom brain is a doozy.
I'm with you on that.
Keys will be in the refrigerator.
Actually, my husband called me the other day and he said, I've lost the keys for this car. I was like, well, you drove it last. And I thought, oh, I drove it last. There's a box of plants in the back garden. Have a look in the box of plants. That's what they were. I lost them for 2 days before I remembered that I'd had them last, and maybe they were in the box of plants. So, yes, I feel you on the keys in the refrigerator.
Yes, but it's been such a pleasure having you. I've been Jess with the Flaky Foodie podcast. You can find me on any platform at the Flaky Foodie. And remember to treat this episode like gossip or the gospel if you enjoyed it, and tell somebody about it, and eat something delicious this week. And if you do, tell me on social media. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. While this may be my first full-length episode that I've posted to YouTube, there are 16 other full-length episodes available wherever you find audio podcasts, or click the link in my description below.